Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the groundbreaking of the National Museum of the United States Army. Please welcome our official party, Secretary of the Army Eric Fanning, Army Chief of Staff General Mark Milley, General Gordon Sullivan, General William Hartzog, Brigadier General Charles Peedy, Captain Jason Stumpf, Brigadier General Leo Brooks.
Secretary Fanning, Assistant Secretary Hammock, General Milley, General Sullivan, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. What a beautiful day. It's not hot, just keep telling yourself that. Good morning and welcome to the ceremonial groundbreaking of the National Museum of the United States Army. If you're able, please rise for the presentation of the colors and remain standing through the national anthem and this morning's invocation offered by the Fort Belvoir chaplain, Lieutenant Colonel Timothy Hibbs.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Out, right shoulder, forward.
Please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a milestone moment. All of us here have been working for this for many years, and it's been made possible because of the support and generosity of scores of corporations, foundations, veteran service organizations, military associations, and 146,000 individual donors. We believe, all of us, that the great Army that we are part of deserves a great national museum. Although the Army Historical Foundation has spearheaded the effort to construct the museum, I must tell you that the effort has long been a partnership and a shared vision both with the Foundation and the Association of the United States Army. AUSA's recently retired President and Chief Executive Officer, General Gordon Sullivan, has personally championed the museum. He's done it from sort of sub rosa, behind the scenes for years. Today he is the chairman of the Army Historical Foundation. He's now out from behind the scenes and leading the museum project from the front. Ladies and gentlemen, General Sullivan.
You going to give us a prayer, Chaplain?
Good morning. Let us pray. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. This is a great day for the United States Army. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. After many years of planning and fundraising, we are ready to break ground for the National Museum of the United States Army. This grand 80-acre landmark will celebrate the selfless service and sacrifice of over 30 million men and women who have worn the Army uniform since 1775. The work begun today should enliven our sense of patriotism and make us ever grateful. We know the familiar words of the psalm, "If the Lord does not build a house, in vain do its builders labor." Whenever we look to the interests of our neighbor, our community, our army, and we serve them, we are, in a sense, God's own co-workers. Let us pray for his help through this celebration, that God will bring the construction to successful completion, and that his protection will keep those who work on it safe from injury. God bless the United States Army, our soldiers, our veterans, and our benefactors. Amen.
Please take your seats. I'll report for counseling after the ceremony. General Sullivan.
I'm going to wear my hat. I always wear a cover, so I guess I'll wear one today so I don't hasten the aging process here. Secretary Fanning, General Milley, Assistant Secretary Hammock, Sergeant Major of the Army Daily, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, troops. Good morning and welcome to the official groundbreaking ceremony for the National Museum of the United States Army. Rolls right off your tongue. I'd ask that you please focus your attention for a moment on the United States Army flag with its 189 campaign streamers. That flag right there, that flag, together with those streamers, has been the only tangible public symbol the United States Army has had in its history of the record, the historical record of its accomplishments in war and indeed peace, in some cases, throughout the world. We have today to represent the entire United States Army's 241-year history, an opportunity to change that. That's about to change with this groundbreaking ceremony. And I'm proud to say that 3 years from now in 2019, somebody asked me what date, I have no idea in 2019, let's say 2019, it's going to be here, the Army will finally have its long overdue National Museum, which will tell the comprehensive story of the Army history as it finally deserves to be told. That's active guard and reserve. 1636 in Massachusetts Bay Colony, the powers that be at that time created 2 regiments of militia, which later became the National Guard. This will be the museum of the entire U.S. Army. You'll get it through first-hand accounts, soldier accounts, never seen before soldier artifacts, dramatic and dynamic venues, state-of-the-art technologies, and high-quality soldier artwork. In recounting the history of an institution as old as our nation, it's actually older, and in celebrating the selfless service of over 30 million American men and women who have worn the uniform of the United States Army, God knows how many of those there have been, in war and peace, requires a unique national education destination. It will take visitors on a fascinating journey throughout the history of the United States of America that will engage their imagination and curiosity, depicting the Army's contributions not only to the nation's defense, but also to America's social, cultural, scientific, technological, and economic growth. In short, Army history is American history, and visitors will have the opportunity to reflect, research, and understand the key roles of the United States Army and the role it has played historically in the development of our country, its freedoms, and it will see the willingness of the men and women who served in the uniform of the United States Army to sacrifice themselves for something larger than themselves, protection of the Constitution of the United States and everything it stands for. As a capstone of the Army Museum enterprise, our intent is also to evolve the National Army Museum as a virtual museum without walls, connectivity with all of the many museums, Army branch, divisional, regional, and specially related museums, as well as the Army Historical Education Center at Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania. All that said, I want to add my deep personal thanks to those of you who have helped bring us to this point so that we can tell the American people of the colorful legacy and the story of how our nation's beginnings evolved into the great nation we are today. A great Army deserves a great museum, and truly, this museum is going to be a very, very special landmark right up the street from our first commanding general's home at Mount Vernon. He was the commanding general 2 times, and he died as the commanding general of the United States Army. And he was buried by the honor guard that you see with the blue flag with 13 stars on it, the old guard. That flag is at his tomb at Mount Vernon. He was our commander twice. So stay with us, stick with us, and you'll see it rise on the ground behind me as this picture depicts. And together, we will complete a world-class museum for the United States Army and its magnificent soldiers, past, present, and yes, future. As long as there is an America, there will be a U.S. Army. And I'm going to say this a couple of weeks from now, and I'm going to say it to you today. I am enormously proud to be able to tell you I am an American soldier. And I understand exactly what I said. An American soldier is a unique person, male or female. Thanks a lot to all of you for coming and braving this heat. Some days are hot, some days are cold, some days suck. This one's a great one.
One of the very first things that you'll see when you enter the museum, just there, will be a series of pylons that have pictures and histories of individual soldiers. We are all about soldiers. They aren't here today, but to give you an idea of what it's going to be, we have invited 3 of the people who will tell those stories, people that they knew very well, all soldiers, and we are very happy to have them. The first is Captain Jason Stumpf of the 92nd Civil Affairs Battalion of the 95th Civil Affairs Brigade at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He'll tell you about his late wife, Lieutenant Ashley White Stumpf.
Thank you, General Hartzog, Secretary Fanning, General Milley, General Sullivan, Sergeant Major Daly, and distinguished guests. I'm very proud and honored to be here today to speak on my wife's story. First, I know she's looking down, smiling while at the same time saying, "Now you've done it," gave this captain a microphone. I should be the first to say that she does not need an honor such as this. She was doing what she did for a greater good, a calling. A great man once said, "Ask not what you can do for your country, ask what you can do for your country." Ashley always believed this when she started out in the Cultural Support Team program. She was assigned to work directly with members of the 75th Ranger Regiment in order to support direct combat operations by interacting with Afghan women and children to gather real-time information. Ashley only wanted to help and answer the call, to prove herself as a sister, a daughter, a wife, and most of all, an American soldier. Ashley would be the first to stand in the entryway and say, she is not the only one that had answered the call, that many before and many after her will do the same thing. That is something this nation will always do. That is the type of person Ashley was. I can only highlight one small aspect of Ashley's character compared to the detail in the book Ashley's War that covers a multitude of stories of Ashley's fellow sisters in arms. The first and only time I've stood in front of a group of people and spoke about Ashley was in a small church in Ohio, the same place Ashley was baptized, received communion, was confirmed, married, and laid to rest. I spoke of Ashley's pure heart, soul, and strong moral compass. With those traits comes the greatest sacrifice, a sacrifice all of us know too well, a sacrifice that supports the strength of this nation, just as the pillars will support the entryway of the museum. I can say now to Ashley, my fellow brothers and sisters in arms that have gone before us, being remembered today, rest easy, because your story is remembered, and as we will forever protect it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker in this series is Brigadier General Charles Peedy, Assistant Judge Advocate General for Military Law and Operations. He'll tell you a little bit about his uncle, Staff Sergeant Donald Dutch Hoffman.
Good morning, and thank you, General Hartzog, Mr. Secretary, General Milley, General Sullivan, distinguished guests, and friends of the museum. My name is Chuck Peedy, and I'm the nephew of a great American soldier, my uncle, Sergeant Donald Dutch Hoffman. Dutch's wife, my aunt, Nancy Hoffman, could not be here today, but I visited with her this weekend. And when I told her of this event and what the foundation was doing on behalf of Dutch, the way you're honoring him, she teared up with joy and her memories of Dutch. She, along with my entire family, thank you for the honor of being part of this groundbreaking and for keeping the memory of an old soldier alive through this new museum, the tribute to the American soldier. Dutch died 16 years ago and is buried with his family, his fellow soldiers in Arlington Cemetery. The Army was Dutch's family, and he always let us, members of my family, knew that. I grew up with Uncle Dutch telling stories about his service in Korea and how his Army family of just a few short years changed his life forever. He was, in his words,
a tough kid on the streets of Erie, Pennsylvania, always in trouble, or in Dutch, as they used to say, which is how he got his name. He enlisted underage at 17, and it wasn't long before he was in Korea. He described to the then young and wide-eyed man now standing in front of you his first firefight. When he huddled in his fighting position in absolute fear, his lieutenant came by afterwards and, in Dutch's words, politely, barked at him, "Give me your piece." Dutch gave him his rifle. The lieutenant sniffed the barrel and said, "If you're not going to shoot your weapon, go get a box of grenades." Well, he did. And in a short time, this same man would be attacking an enemy machine gun position by himself, rescuing wounded soldiers, his fellow soldiers, multiple times, and carrying the assault over the hill, and therefore receiving the Silver Star for his gallantry. Dutch never pulled a punch about the transformation. He said it was good leaders and his family, the fellow soldiers that he soldiered with. He would later be wounded in battle and left for dead, only to have soldiers take his lifeless body to a collection point where miracle-working Army doctors brought him back to life. After the Army, the GI Bill allowed Dutch to earn an engineering degree from Gannon College in Erie, Pennsylvania. And he ultimately became a senior vice president for Kaiser Aluminum and a highly successful businessman. But he never forgot his Army family. His devotion to the Army was lifelong and complete. Later, as a member of Gannon College's Board of Trustees, he fought for the ROTC program. When ROTC was unpopular, it was Dutch, the former NCO, that insisted to the college that it must keep the program, a program that, because of Dutch, thrives today, producing officers of distinction and accomplishment. That from Sergeant Hoffman. The Army was his life, and in honor of his contributions, what is now Gannon University dedicated a marble bench in front of his student hall to Dutch after his passing to honor his contributions to the ROTC program, a program that also honors Dutch annually with a family award in his name to the top cadet in the battalion. Dutch was a soldier's soldier. Word is his bond, shirt off his back, loyal, and a devoted man. And for Dutch, it all began with the Army and ended with the Army. This tribute to Dutch and to all the other soldiers brings the tough kid from the streets of Erie full circle and is exactly what our Army and our nation is all about. Making the most of opportunity. The Army changed Dutch, and he changed the people in the world around him. You honor Dutch today and all these great soldiers, and Dutch would be immensely proud and humbled, and his family will be forever grateful. And I thank you.
Thank you. Our third and last of the personal story speakers is Brigadier General Leo Brooks, Jr., U.S. Army, retired. He'll tell you a little bit about his dad, also Brigadier General Leo Brooks, U.S. Army, retired.
Secretary Fanning, General Milley, General Sullivan, General Hartzog, Secretary Hammack, Sergeant Major Daly, thank you for giving me this great honor to participate in the historic groundbreaking for the National Museum of the United States Army. So why is it an honor? It's an honor because my family, just like many of those in this crowd here today, have devoted their life to serving our nation as American soldiers. And here on this ground, the American people and the world for that matter will get to see, feel, and hear the stories of the men and women who shaped our history and paved the way for the freedoms we enjoy. So in my case, you're going to get to hear about my father's story and the soldier's story gallery. My father, Leo Austin Brooks, entered the Army from Virginia State College in Petersburg, Virginia in 1954. Just a few years after the Korean War and Executive Order 9981, which ended official racial discrimination in the military. His journey was filled with challenges as he sought to be respected for the leader that he was and for the opportunities to serve wherever his talent would guide him. He always kept the legacy forged in the sacrifices made by others burning bright in every thought, word, and deed. He and my mother, Naomi Lewis Brooks, raised their 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, with that same mindset. Always do your best. Never be content with average. Always remember your actions reflect on others. Never quit. After 30 years as an Army logistician and 2 tours in Vietnam, he had risen to become a general officer. By the way, speaking of his Vietnam experience, to this day, he still has a pinup photo of my mom in a bathing suit that she sent to him in Vietnam for motivation, hanging on the wall in his office at home. As he retired, I was able to observe so many people that he had touched and shaped and mentored, black and white, male and female, guard, reserve, active, uniformed, and civilian. My brother and I both naturally followed in his profession because we could see and feel the nobility of the Army's core values. I'm proud to have served our nation as an American soldier, as an infantryman, to have commanded a Ranger Company, an 82nd Airborne Battalion and Brigade, and to have served as the Commandant of the United States Military Academy. I retired after 27 years in uniform as a Brigadier General, having had opportunities that my dad could never have dreamed of having himself, but he always wanted for us. Now, my younger brother, the underachiever, continues to serve and is blazing new trails, having become the first African-American first captain at West Point in 1980, and now leading all U.S. and coalition forces in the unstable region on the Korean Peninsula as the 4-star commander of the United States Forces Korea. We all owe a debt of gratitude to the sacrifices made by the men, women, and families that shared in the shedding of blood, sweat, and tears, and the joy of the comradeship that comes from being a soldier that cannot be replicated in any other profession. God bless those who continue to serve, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
I think what you just heard is indicative of the individual stories of ordinary people who did extraordinary things that you'll experience in the museum. Thank you, gentlemen. This morning, we're both honored and fortunate to have the Army's senior military and civilian leaders as our keynote speakers and key participants in the groundbreaking. Just a word about them before I introduce them. General Mark Milley, the Army's 39th Chief of Staff, and Secretary Eric Fanning, the 22nd Secretary of the Army. I can't be certain. I tried to look it up, but I suspect this is one of those rare occasions when both the Chief and the Secretary are Ivy Leaguers. General Milley has a bachelor's from Princeton and a master's from Columbia. Secretary Fanning has a bachelor's in history from Dartmouth. One thing I can tell you, having worked with and seen both of these gentlemen work, they are exactly what we need to lead our Army today. During his distinguished military career, General Milley has served in command and leadership positions in every level of command in the Army. Equally enviable, and I use the word enviable as a fellow combat infantry soldier, he spent nearly his entire career in the infantry and the special operations assignments. He served in 8 different divisions and special forces group. He's also one of 3 Army Chiefs of Staff who've earned 2 awards of the Combat Infantryman Badge, and the only one to have done so in the last 33 years. Why don't you just stand there and make sure it doesn't fall again, please. A little bit of excitement. In the past months of General Milley's tenure as a chief, he's really worked diligently and decisively to ensure force readiness. He's now engaged in developing his thoughts and working toward modernization for the force in the future. He also, on every day, addresses care and quality of the life of our soldiers and of their families. Ladies and gentlemen, our leader, General Milley.
Hey, thanks, General Hartzog. I appreciate those comments, and I appreciate you coordinating to have the Army colors fall onto General Sullivan. I thought we were going to have to lose him there for a minute. But I want to thank all of you for coming, and I do note that about half the Army staff is here today, which means we're getting about half the work done. So this will be over shortly, and you'll be working a little bit late. But thanks all of you for coming, and I particularly want to publicly thank General Sullivan for his incredible work in bringing together lots of different people to make this museum a reality, make this groundbreaking today a reality, and make the museum a reality in the near future. Secretary Fanning, thank you also for your leadership. And I echo what General Hartzog said. Secretary Fanning is exactly the right leader that the Army needs right now, and I am very, very privileged to be serving along his side. There are Gold Star families present, so thank you also for being here. That's very, very special and very meaningful for all of us. This is a history museum, so I'm a bit of a history buff, and I've given a speech a couple times about the myths of warfare, and I do want to dispel one myth that's out there about history, and it's kind of gone viral. It's on the internet, and it's in different blog sites right now, I guess. But it is an absolute myth that General Sullivan was there at the birth of the Army in 1775. I can confirm that. He was not there. I've Googled him. I went on the information highway, and I Googled. He's actually not that old. But thanks, General Sullivan, for all you've done. And finally, we're here for the groundbreaking. And this is a big day. It's a great day. So I went on the information highway last night as I was reminded by my aide that I had a speech to give today, so don't want to peak too early. So I went on Wikipedia, the incredible source of history, and I found out that today, in 1814, Francis Scott Key, he was inspired to write the words that now have become our Star-Spangled Banner. And I was so happy to see all of you standing during that great song. And then also today, on September 14th, 1847, the United States Marines, mind you, and this is an Army museum, under General Scott, entered Mexico City, and then the halls of Montezuma became famous. And I know the Marines aren't Army, but my dad was a Marine, and I must say that they were commanded by United States Army General Scott. And then on this day, in 1901, Teddy Roosevelt was sworn in as the youngest to serve as President of the United States after William McKinley died from an assassination. And of course, President Roosevelt, then Colonel Roosevelt, Army officer, led volunteers in the Spanish-American War. And then on this day in 1940, Congress debated and finally passed the first peacetime conscription bill a couple of years after Europe and Asia were ablaze in the Second World War. 34 million registered for the draft, and 10 million of young men and women served in the ranks of our United States Army and military during World War II, and I'm proud to say that both my parents did that. In 1944, on this day, the great National Guard Division from Pennsylvania, the 28th Infantry Division, attacked alongside the 4th Infantry Division from the regular Army and pushed through the West Wall, the Siegfried Line, the German final defense before entering the heartland of Germany in World War II. You can get all of that on the information highway. But why is this groundbreaking important? Why is Army history so important? Why are we constructing a 185,000 square foot building with a display of more than 15,000 pieces of art, 30,000 artifacts and documents and images? And why do we expect that over 750,000 visitors will come to this museum a year? Well, this museum will be complete in a few years, and the purpose is to provide insights into the United States Army and our nation's history since 14 June 1775, officially, and well before that in the Holy Land of Massachusetts, going back to 1636. Although you can Google it, and you can Google a lot about American history, you can never truly connect unless you can see the weapons that they used, the uniforms they wore, the stories they told, the letters they wrote, the equipment that kept them alive, and understand how an army prepared for and then fought in war, conflicts around the world, how the Army deters enemies, assures allies, how the Army did peacekeeping and humanitarian assistance or disaster relief. This museum is going to offer everyone, all Americans, free of charge, an experience that you cannot find in the pages of a history book or on Google. This museum will enhance what all of us have learned in school about America, about our Army, about the cost, the pain, and the sacrifice of war, not in dollars, but in lives like Ashley, lives that this nation has paid to defend freedom at home and abroad. And this museum is going to remind all of us what it means to be a soldier, what it means to serve with incredible sacrifice and incredible pride. And most importantly, this museum is a tribute to those 30 million soldiers who've worn the distinguished uniform of the United States Army. And it's a tribute to all of their families, their friends, their loved ones who supported them, shed their blood, gave the ultimate sacrifice for the last 241 years. It captures the human experience of the United States Army, and it facilitates an individual, a personal relationship for all of us today with the history of our country and our Army. It's going to bring together people from all walks of life, and it reminds all of us of the American spirit embodied in each generation, the greatest generation to the not-so-great generations, and all of us that have served in this uniform. All of us who have fought to defend our freedom. That lives on today in the current generation. History moves on. Right now, today, we have 187,000 soldiers in 140 countries around the world standing on the wall, facing death and destruction right in the face and defending our freedom. Those are people who have seen combat in Afghanistan and Iraq and elsewhere around the world. It's our communities and our families that'll get to see that story of the Army and so find so much about our country's history. It is who we are. We all must study it. We all must learn from it. We all must be proud of it. And I can't tell you how humbled I am to be the Chief of Staff of the greatest Army in the history of the world. Thank you. Army strong.
Thank you, Chief. Our last speaker today is the Secretary of the Army. He is the steward, and he leads stewardship for the United States Army in all of its dimensions: manpower, personnel, reserve affairs, installations, environmental issues, weapons systems, acquisitions, communications, and financial management. And that's what I found on Wikipedia last night. We are in extraordinarily capable hands. I'd just like to run through a small list of Secretary Fanning's background so you'll understand why I just said that. He spent most of the preceding 25 years in government service, a staff member for the House Armed Services Committee, a special assistant in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, Associate Director of Political Affairs in the Clinton White House. In 2001, he became a Senior Vice President of the Business Executives for National Security. That's an organization that tries to apply business solutions to some of the problems of defense. He later was a Deputy Director of the Committee on the Prevention of Mass Destruction, Proliferation, and Terrorism. He resumed his service with the Department of Defense in 2009. He was named successively the Deputy Undersecretary of the Navy, the Undersecretary of the Air Force, the Acting Secretary of the Air Force, Chief of Staff to the Secretary of Defense, and Acting Undersecretary of the Army. And most important to all of us, since May the 18th of this year, he is our leader, Secretary of the Army. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Fanning.
Thank you, General Hartzog, for that kind and too long introduction. General Sullivan, it's always good to see you. General Sullivan was the Chief of Staff of the Army when I first arrived in the Pentagon in January of 1993. And General Milley, the Chief now, nice bookends on the stage. And by the way, I'm not so sure that flag was headed for General Sullivan, so I'm glad it didn't take you out. In the many years since I arrived in the Pentagon in 1993 and my times in and out of the Pentagon, I've seen a number of Service Secretary and Chief of Staff combinations. Some worked well, some didn't work at all. And I've tried to work, pledged to work very hard to make our relationship one of the stronger ones. And actually, it's been pretty easy because I can't imagine having a better partner in this than you. And I think about that every day. So thank you very much, General Milley, for being here today and for being such a great partner in this work. We have waited 241 years and 3 months, 88,116 days, to be exact, for this moment. If there's one reason we've waited so long, why the nation's first military service is the last to have its own dedicated museum, it might be this. It's almost impossible to separate the Army story from our nation's story. In so many ways, the history of the Army is the history of America. It was the Continental Army's founding general who went on to become our first president. It was an Army captain and second lieutenant, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, who led the first team to cross our continent. And it was the Army Corps of Engineers who would build the national roads, rails, canals, and bridges to connect that continent. In our next century, Army scientists would take America to new frontiers, making early advancements in aviation, inventing solar cells that made space age possible, and launching America's first satellite and sending Americans into space. This museum will chronicle this history, the history of how the Army's people have always been our nation's pioneers. It will also chronicle the many inflection points where our future has depended upon teams of dedicated soldiers, Americans willing to live by our Army values and sacrifice their lives for our nation. This museum will also serve as a monument to them, as a memorial to all the Army has lost and to war's incredible cost. Among our services, this has special significance to the Army. From the Revolutionary War to our fights in Iraq and Afghanistan, it is the Army that has borne the greatest share of our nation's losses. Fully 85% all Americans who have given their lives in our nation's wars. This museum will not shy away from this remarkable record of sacrifice. It is a part of who we are as an Army and what has allowed us to become who we are as a country. Our soldiers have played a critical role in making our nation and world more secure and in forming a more perfect union for all Americans. I'm reminded of that history every day by a framed piece of regimental colors in my office. It's what remains of the standard carried in the Civil War by the 54th Massachusetts, the Army's first African-American regiment. On July 18, 1863, Sergeant William H. Carney retrieved these colors from a fallen soldier, carrying them forward despite multiple wounds. He survived to return the flag to his own lines. "I only did my duty," he said. The old flag never touched the ground. This small piece of fabric has been preserved so that today it brings history alive for all who see it. It helps tell our story of not just one courageous soldier, but also the story of our most costly conflict and our nation's complicated journey. It's a priceless piece of our country's history. Eventually, it will come here, joining thousands of other artifacts that help tell our shared story as Americans. As important as this museum's collection will be in chronicling our past, it also provides soldiers a place to record, catalog, and share their stories with fellow citizens. At a time when the disconnect between those who serve and those they defend is greater than at few other times in our history, strengthening the bond between America's soldiers and America's communities is more important than ever. By highlighting the historic and continuing links between our nation, its highest ideals, and our Army, this museum will help strengthen these critical bonds. It will work to ensure that the values so many Americans have served and sacrificed to protect will endure. For all here today who have dedicated so much to make this museum possible, thank you. This institution will provide the men and women of America's Army and all our citizens with both a monument and meeting place. This museum will make it possible for more Americans to see how closely the history of their nation and the history of their Army are intertwined. And as these visitors engage more deeply with their history, hopefully they will ask themselves what role they can play in securing our nation's future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Before we close, and just checking on my cell phone, it's now 89 degrees, so we're not really to the point of disaster yet. Just a moment to thank some of those who are directly involved in today's ceremony and in making it what it has been. So on behalf of the Foundation, I'd like to thank Colonel Angie Holbrook, who is the garrison commander, and her staff, Ms. Tammy Call, who is the director of the National Museum of the United States Army, Randy Robinson, who is our touchstone in the Secretariat, and I'd also like to thank the Army Band who played for us today, the 3rd Infantry Regiment who carried our colors, the Fort Belvoir staff who have been very instrumental and supportive in helping us do this. So in just a moment, we'll close this ceremony by standing and singing the Army song. Before we do that, I'd like to say that the next step in this would be Secretary Fanning, the Honorable Catherine Hammack, the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Installations, Environment, and Energy, General Milley, General Sullivan, and the Sergeant Major of the Army, Daniel Daly, will conclude our ceremony by conducting the official ground baking at this little piece of ground that we dug up to make sure that no one was hurt when they tried to do this. It's been my honor and privilege to be your master of ceremonies today. I work for General Sullivan proudly and have for a number of years. I'd just say that, echoing his words, my father was a soldier. I was an active soldier for 36 years. I'm a soldier today, and I will be until I'm gone. Thank you for coming. Can we all stand and join in our Army song? Shalom, sing a song with the army and the tree.
Who have fought to victory. We're the army and proud of our name. We're the army and proudly proclaim. First to fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. Then it's hi, hi, hey, the army's on its way. Count off the cadence loud and strong, for where'er we go, you will always know that the army goes rolling along.
Digging time. You got to dig in. I know you're a tanker, but we got to dig in.
Thank you for attending the groundbreaking of the National Museum of the United States Army. This concludes our program. Please make your way to the shuttle drop-off location and follow the directions of soldiers and staff. Thank you for your cooperation. Have a safe trip home.